We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Sharon Roseborough, and I'm Vice President of Leadership Development. I'd like to welcome you to the Back to School Guidance for Special Education Parents Workshop. We have the question and answer box available. If you have any questions, please put them in the question and answer box. I'd like to introduce our guest speakers and share their background. Ms. Chinwe Osondu is a special education consultant and mathematics specialist at the New Jersey Department of Education. Chinwe earned a MSc degree in special education from Touro College and an MA degree in teaching middle school mathematics from Montclair State University. She is currently pursuing her doctorate in educational leadership, management, and policy at Seton Hall University. Chinwe has taught at all levels from K through 12 and provides training and technical assistance to districts across the state of New Jersey. In her spare time, Chinwe enjoys listening to her Audible books, traveling, and being a mom to 3 amazing kids. We also have Ms. Debbie Esposito. She is a co-director of the Start Engaging Parents of Students with Disabilities in Schools project of the SPAN Parent Advocacy Network. She is also the parent group specialist for Camden, Gloucester, and Salem counties. Debbie graduated from Bucknell University with a BA in Economics and International Relations. She is originally from Philadelphia, but has lived in Southern New Jersey for over 15 years. Before coming to SPAN, Debbie worked in her school district as an instructional aide in several special needs classrooms where she learned the importance of parent-professional collaboration to improve student outcomes. To that end, she helped to form and is currently co-chair of her district's Special Education Parent Advisory Group. Since starting with SPAN as a resource parent volunteer, Debbie has been passionate about the power of the parent voice in improving outcomes for families, particularly the most vulnerable family members, children with disabilities and chronic health care needs. Debbie was grateful for the opportunity to make the move from volunteer to SPAN employee with the START project. In her work as a parent group specialist, she eagerly continues her work helping parent groups to work collaboratively with their districts to give needed input on programs and policies affecting their children with special needs. As project coordinator of the Parent Leadership Development Initiative, Debbie works to build capacity within the county councils for young children and helps parents to find their voices and become the leaders making the changes in their communities to improve outcomes for all families. Thank you, ladies, for coming on and doing the workshop for us, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Just so you know, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera as well, just to save bandwidth so I don't have any frozen screens. But thank you. So let's get started. Oops. So thank you very much again, Sharon, for inviting us here today. Before we get started, I wanted to say that, well, let's just review the objectives. So at the conclusion of this presentation, we would like for you to understand the state's guidance around school reopening. We would also like for you to learn how to create stability for children during this really unstable time, and to discover ways to advocate for children while effectively communicating with school personnel. We'd like for you to, we would like for you to be able to access information and resources that will be helpful in navigating these changing times. We will be providing a link to a resource page and hope that you find all of these resources helpful. You know, I have to say also, just as a side note, that while Chinwe and I were preparing for this, we were over the last week or so, we were talking about our individual school districts, and we were just marveling at how things are changing day by day, I would say even hour by hour, as more and more school districts are moving to 100% remote start, and things are changing. It's just, we are living in a very fluid time, very flexible time. And so it's so important for us to be able to access the resources and the information that will help our children to be able to thrive. Chinwe?
Yes, thank you so much. All right, so it's important for everyone to know that the Road Back, Start and Recovery Plan for Education will provides educators and administrators with the information necessary to ensure that all our schools reopen safely in any format and that they're prepared to accommodate students' unique needs during this unprecedented time. The plan that was presented by the state relates to 4 key subject areas: conditions for learning, leadership in planning, policy and funding, and continuity of learning. It's important to note that the framing guidance from the DOE stresses 3 key things: that we need to be flexible, we need to understand that our students and our children learn in different ways, and encourage our students and our children to self-reflect on their learning. What do we mean when we talk about flexibility? As a parent or a caregiver or as an educator, we need to be prepared for the change. Recommendations with regard to the pandemic are constant. And as adults, we're having trouble processing this time in history. So that means that our children are also having a hard time processing this new routine and learning from home. What about the learning styles? Every child has a unique learning style, and we must honor their style. Children are not empty vessels, they come with knowledge. And so we need to use this knowledge as a starting point to engage and teach them. We need to reflect as adults with our children and our students. And as we do this, we can keep a log or a journal of what is working and what is not working, and use that as a strategy to move forward and deal with the changes that we're dealt with. So now we need to think about setting the stage for success. And this involves quite a bit of planning. I'm sure many of us must have heard the saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So it is critical that we set up and plan for our students so that they can be successful. What does this involve? We need to ensure that they have a designated learning space. We also need to review the learning expectations so that we can anticipate some of the challenges that our children will face, as well as some misconceptions that could arise along the way. It's important that we create a visual schedule and that we consider using a timer. Now, as I mentioned earlier, not every child is the same. We will have children that do not want to follow a routine or are just having a hard time because, again, this is new to them. And so what do we do when we're faced with children who don't want to follow the routines or are having a hard time? We need to start by involving them. Let them help us make the routine, make them part of the decision-making process, and give them choices to say what they would like to be part of the routine. Because guess what? This helps to build their confidence, and then they feel like they're in charge and they can take ownership of this routine. We must be realistic about the time and the priorities because, again, this is a very stressful time for everyone. And so let's be aware of the time it takes, the amount of time it takes for them to get up, get dressed, pack up, have breakfast, whatever it is for them to adjust and get into the routine for their learning. We just want to make sure that our children feel important and that they feel that they can do this. But as we do this, we want to make sure that we're clear when we explain the routine and we give them specific directions. So let's give an example of maybe tidying up. Rather than saying, could you please vacuum your room today? We might want to say, could you vacuum your room and make sure you've made your bed, put away things. And so we're specific in what we want to do, not just say clean the room. Also, we want to make sure that the routine that we give our students and our children is put into writing so that there's no confusion and they have something that they can refer to. And let's try to make sure that when we give a routine, that we chunk it no more than 3 to 5 items at a time. Otherwise, it becomes overwhelming. And finally, we want to make sure that we praise our children and we praise our students when they follow the routine. Anything to build their confidence and their self-image is very important. So now we want to talk about helping our children stay focused. How do we do this? We can consider keeping our students close by so that they can be focused when someone is around them, but we don't always have the opportunity to be with our students or our children. So maybe we could have someone else that we trust be close to them. We can also put them in a room with an open door and encourage self-regulation. How do we encourage self-regulation? By teaching them how to manage their emotions, encouraging them to put away the remote control, their cell phones, and just make sure that they're in a comfortable space. We need to also allow them to have frequent brain breaks if necessary, so that they feel like they can handle this and in a comfortable situation as well. For those of our students or our children that are anxious, we should have things around them to help calm them down and support them, like calming bottles, chewy toys, snacks, fidgets, play-doh, soothing music. We can discuss with them things that we're grateful for. We can allow them to go for a walk, or maybe have a designated space in the house that we call a chill spot. And so they know that they can go here whenever they need to relax or just chill out. Okay. And we just need to understand their limitation and understand that our children can only focus for a certain amount of time. And so when we're aware of this limitation and how much they're able to focus, then we can plan that and integrate that into the instruction. We just want to make sure that they have all the supports they need to be successful. All right, so we're encouraging our students to take ownership and effort. So the first thing we want to do is follow our students' interest and input as well. And so we need to understand that home is now the new school. For our young learners, this could involve transforming the learning spaces to reflect their students' interest. We could use minions, superheroes, pictures of TikTok, and then we show pride by displaying their work. And then we give them detailed praise by giving specifics about their work. Again, we want to make sure that as much as possible, we frame all feedback positively. Okay, sorry, I just had a slight difficulty. Okay, and as we continue to do this, we start from strengths and build up. So we don't want to focus on areas that they're having difficulty. We want to focus on areas that our children are doing well. And so when we focus on the positives, then we accentuate those positives and give them the opportunity to work from there and improve. Presentation is everything. We want to make sure that we present things in a way that makes them open-minded and willing to start the task. I remember my parents always telling me, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And so as we interact with our students and our children, we want to make sure that we present the information in a way that they feel they can handle it and they're successful. So we try to frame tasks as games. For example, scavenger hunts or the use of Jeopardy before an assessment or as a review, or math bingo, or a memory game for some of our students that are ESL students or ELL learners, or fishbowl or charades. So we want to make sure that when we convert the task into a game, then the kids don't feel as overwhelmed that they're learning, and it's kind of like a little trick that they're having fun while learning. And also using natural consequences and incentivizing the effort and the progress.
Thank you, Chinwe. Those are all great tips. So Sharon, if now's a good time, if you have any questions about anything that we've covered so far, you can either raise your hand or Sharon, or enter your questions in the questions pane and Sharon will read them to us.
Yeah, so far there is not a question. Uh,
Okay.
there was a comment. One of the panelists commented that she uses custom checklists that she made using the Clip Trip, and it's really helped her kids be more independent and self-sufficient.
That's great. In the resources that we shared, there are sample schedules for, I believe, Chinwe, they're divided, what is it, K to 5 and I think 6 to 12?
Correct. That's right.
Right. So please, those of you take advantage of those. So moving on. So just to say that this school year will be different is, I guess, probably one of the biggest understatements that I could make. But for example, this graphic was taken from the Road Back guidance from the state. And this just illustrates one of the many, many hybrid forms of instruction or models of instruction that schools may be using this year. So just to understand that our students are going to be anxious, and we are. So we understand that our children are going to be anxious. They may be concerned about being behind and not being able to catch up, following all the new the safety guidelines that they're having to face, like wearing a mask and washing your hands so many times a day. They may be anxious about some trauma that they may have experienced during this time away. Many families have suffered job loss, sickness, illness, even death. Some people for the first time have suffered food insecurity. So children are the children that are coming back to school this year, whether it be virtual or in person, are most likely not the same children that left in March. So we have to be mindful of our students' situations and status, and be able to advocate for them and provide the support that they're going to need. So in that vein, we thought we would present some best practices for communication and advocacy. So now more than ever, communication between schools and families is going to be crucial. A two-way communication plan between home and school should be in place and evaluated on a fairly regular basis. Parents should have a way of indicating their preferred means of providing and receiving communication. For example, focus groups, surveys, text messages. Do you prefer phone or email? All staff need strategies on ways to effectively communicate with all parents and families, and parents need to know how to reach teachers and staff members and when. We have to be mindful too that our staff members are most likely, or many, or often at home with their children as well. So when is the appropriate time to reach out to staff members or teachers? Families who have home languages other than English may have concerns about communicating with the school about their child's language and literacy development. Any communication should be provided in languages to allow parents to support their children at home. So if schools are using packets, those packets need to be in languages that parents can use to support their children. We know that there are many different concerns and that folks may have at this time, and really want to encourage you to look for ways to advocate by connecting with other parents who may have the same concerns. Use the resources and groups that you already are familiar with and are available to you to discuss your concerns and plans. For example, special education parent advisory groups, or CPAGs, PTAs, PTOs, parent advisory councils, Title I parent groups, HSAs. Joining with these groups can help you connect with other families and share information to the school. So as you begin to connect with these families who have similar needs and concerns, you can work together to advocate for your children and help the school recognize that the issue is not uniquely your family issue, and always looking for common ground, as focusing on common ground needs and goals will help you highlight these as systemic rather than individual issues, increasing the probability that they will be addressed quickly by the district or school. You should also familiarize yourself with any district initiatives or frameworks such as NJTSS, RTI, to see how your concerns fit in, and also so that you can use the same language that the school is using. So next steps, so planning for success. We talked about some best practices, so how do we put these into practice? So first of all, if you are a parent of a child with special needs, it is so, so important, and I can't say it enough or stress it enough for you to understand your child's IEP. If your child has an IEP or even a 504 plan, it's so important for you to understand what's in it and who is responsible for implementing it. Find out who the important people are: case manager, teacher, related service professional, 504 coordinator. Determine how and when your child will receive services, at home or in school while socially distancing. One of the resources that we provided is a SPAN resource that's called Frequently Asked Questions. There are frequently asked IEP questions, and there's also a COVID-19 frequently asked questions or questions you should ask, and as well as a virtual IEP meeting tip sheet. Parents will need information on strategies and frequent communication, whether it's bi-weekly, monthly, or however you determine with your team, about your children's progress. Parents should be given the opportunity to share feedback with the school and make decisions about what their child is learning. Ask the school, how will they be assessing your child on the return to school? When we go back in September, we will have been away from school buildings for close to 7 months. That's a long break. That's what a lot of people are calling the COVID slide. Will your school be using a universal screener to assess where your child is now? How will that work if your child is receiving remote instruction? Is the universal screener one that can be done remotely or virtually? I know that some of them are. Communication with the school personnel, teachers, nurses, therapists, child study team is more important than ever. Share information and tips that will help school staff support your child. Provide updates about what services or supports your child has missed and how this has impacted them. Share concerns about the COVID slide. Communicate openly, respectfully, and in a timely way. Remember that they have families too, like I mentioned. Another resource that we provided is the back to school update form. That's a very concise way of kind of getting your thoughts in order about what your child has missed, what their challenges were maybe back in the spring or even over the summer, whether those challenges are academic, social, emotional, just so that your teacher or your child's teacher this fall will have an idea of where they are and where the starting point is. Connect with other parents, like I said before, special education parent advisory groups, Title I groups, any of the other bilingual advisory committees. Do the committees meet? Make sure that the committees are meeting at a time that are convenient for you. And when I say make sure, I mean encourage them. If you're a part of the leadership team, or even if you're not, make suggestions about what time is good for you or many of the parents that you may be connecting with. Some parents in some areas, daytime meetings work well. Some areas, not so much. So connect with these parents to find out what's going to work for you all. Join forces with parents, again, who have similar needs, and utilize those resources like Chinwe was saying, SPAN, Parent Advocacy Group. We're here for you. There are many other resources and groups that are listed on the resource page that we provided. So are there any questions about where we are so far?
There are questions on the chat or the question and answer box.
Great. Okay. Chinwe.
Okay. So as we continue, we want to make sure that we do not neglect our social and emotional well-being, because this is very, very important. And it's very easy to take it for granted during these times, because we're thinking about so much and we're doing so much during this uncertain times. But we must make sure that we pay attention to it. And I want you to take a moment and think about the emergency procedures that are provided for travelers on a plane. And as part of the instructions that are provided for travelers, they always tell you, if a child is seated beside you, you must make sure that you put on your own mask before helping to put a mask on the child. So if you do not take care of yourself, you will not be in the best situation to take care of the child sitting next to you or helping someone else that's near you. So you want to make sure that you put your social emotional well-being at the forefront of taking care of everything else. So how do you do this? Like, what are some tips that you need to pay attention to? Well, think about things that help to relax you. Maybe journaling, maybe going for a walk, meditating, exercising. You want to make sure that you take care of those things first that help to keep you calm before you try to support those around you. Something else that's very helpful is establishing routines. As you know, these are very uncertain times, and most of our students and our children with disabilities are used to a structure, they're used to a routine, but that doesn't really seem to be the case now. So as much as possible, if we're able to set up a routine in the house, the kids can still know what to expect, and that takes away some of the anxiety that they experience, and helps them to feel some level of calmness. We also want to make sure that we're intentional about our presence and know that presence is not the same as being present. We shouldn't assume that just because we're in the house, it means we're around our families or our children or whoever it is. We want to make sure that we're intentional. And so make time to talk, make time to, converse or play a game or walk together, play, whatever it is. Make sure that you make time to do things together. I did mention earlier to take a moment to be grateful for things that are happening, things that are working, and because that's a powerful way to bond. You also want to engage in creativity together, whether it's through exercise or baking or cooking or coloring, playing board games, writing a poem, whatever it is. We want to make sure that we try to be intentional in doing things together with our families and celebrate, no matter how little it is. Find ways to celebrate every single day and develop the resilience to squash negative events that may be happening in our lives. And let's try to practice active listening. I don't know about you, but I do get pretty upset when I'm speaking to someone and they're looking at their cell phone or they're looking at something else, because it means that I don't really matter. So we want to make sure that we practice active listening, because that makes people feel like, yes, they matter and what they're saying is important. And so we want to be mindful at our body language and try our best to validate what our children say and try to be positive, help them to develop self-compassion and find ways to empathize with those around us. We also want to make sure that we help our children express or name their emotions. So for example, if they're having a hard time identifying their feelings, we could encourage them to express it by drawing a picture or maybe a facial expression or through a movement in their body. Our older children, our older students can try to journal. For example, if I were a weather reporter and my feelings were the weather, it would be a storm today, okay? Or it would be cloudy and it would be a gloomy day, but something to help us understand exactly how they're feeling. We want to make sure that we practice social emotional learning daily, because our emotions and our stresses change from hour to hour and day to day. And there will be times that people just start crying for no reason and they don't know why. And so we want to make sure, again, that we are understanding, we're patient, and we're empathetic with those around us, because these are difficult times and we need to recognize that. And also, we also want to make sure that we build in transition time mindfully for the students and give them a moment to process when they need to move from one activity to the other. Again, we want to be careful so that we don't inject fear and more worry and uncertainty into their lives, because there's so much going on. We want to make sure that when we ask a question, we give them a moment and listen and model eye contact so that we can listen to what they're saying. Again, if you're not paying attention to what they're saying, then they don't feel the need to tell you what's going on. So we want to make sure that we give them all our undivided attention and consistently dedicate structured time to connect. All right, so I'd like to share with you one of my famous quotes that I try to live by. Of course, a lot of things that you share with your friends and loved ones, you don't always practice, but I do make an effort and try to live by this quote. And this is a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And it says, "Finish each day and be done with it. You have done what you could. Some blunders and absurdities no doubt have crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. You shall begin it well and serenely and with too high a spirit to be encumbered with your old nonsense."
I love that. I love that. When Chinwe showed me, I was like, that's amazing, because we all have days like that. So I know we have time, but I just want to kind of review what we've talked about so far. So we talked about the state's guidance on remote instruction. We offered suggestions for creating a stable learning environment for your child. We provided options and best practices to advocate for your child while communicating with the school personnel and PTA. And we provided information and resources that will be helpful in working through these challenging times. So I do know that the PTA is one of the nation's oldest parent advocacy groups, and being part of SPAN, you know, that is something that I respect. So we really want to make sure that we are taking advantage of our opportunities and creating opportunities where there aren't, to advocate for our children, to improve outcomes, especially during this time. There are so many variables in what's going on in our education, and we have to be the stabilizing factor for our children. So Chinwe and I actually would like to ask you now. If first of all, Sharon, let me ask, are there any questions?
We do have one.
Okay.
They wanted to know, is SPAN offering virtual support in preparation for and during IEP meetings?
So SPAN is doing everything virtually. So I'm gonna go ahead and say yes. We transitioned back in March, you know, middle of March and April, to doing virtually. Everything is being done virtually. So we're continuing to have CPAG meetings. We're doing that virtually. I am, you know, becoming very familiar with not only Zoom, but GoToMeeting, WebEx. It's like, so it's, yeah, so we are doing virtual meetings, virtual telephone meetings, phone conferences. I know that our family rep, parent group specialists do support during IEP meetings, as well as our special education volunteer advocates, our SAVA volunteers. So I'm going to say yes. I would encourage you to call the SPAN warm line, which I don't actually have in front of me, but I'll put it in the chat box before the end. But yes, the short answer is yes. We are providing online support.
Also, they wanted to know where the link to the resource page. I have to just double check it. I know you typed it in at the beginning, but when they tried it, they said the link was invalid.
That's interesting. Well, you know what? If you're having a problem with the link, because it is a Google link, what I can do is I can make sure that Rose has the document, and we can share, when you share the resources and the recording, we'll make sure that it's attached to that. Okay? I apologize if the link doesn't work, but we'll make sure that you have all the resources.
Okay.
And so let's see. So we would like you to share your thoughts right now. So after what we've talked about, is there, you know, what would you like to check out? You know, you can complete any or as many of these as you would like. I'd like to check out the most interesting thing you learned was. I'd like to know more about what I learned today. Helps me to understand. The best part I liked was, or what I really understood. And while you're thinking about that or typing that in, if there are no questions, and feel free to continue, to ask questions if you think of them. I would like to also do a plug for the census. So I don't know if all of you have filled out the census. That's wonderful. If you haven't filled it out, I'm imploring you to do so. So much is at stake when we talk about the New Jersey census. The number of seats in the New Jersey House of Representatives, votes in the Electoral College, how it determines how our voting district boundaries are drawn, not to mention the $45 billion in revenue that is also dependent on the census. Also, many times there are populations all over that are termed hard to count populations, including children under 5. Last year, or in the last census, there were over 125,000 children who weren't counted. We have to remember, a lot of times when you have children in the house, small children, people don't count them, young children, babies, infants, but you have to think about the fact that if you don't count a child that's maybe 1 or 2 years old, that child, in terms of the census, is not going to exist until they're 12 years old, 11 or 12 years old. So, this only comes around every 10 years, and it only takes about 10 minutes to fill out. So I wanted to encourage people strongly. If you need help with it, you can always reach out to census2020nj.org, and they will assist you. And after talking about counting people, I want to also encourage you to vote this year more than ever before. It is so important for you to vote. Everybody wants to be counted. Everybody should count. Your vote counts. Everybody's vote counts. That's the important thing. So remember, mail-in deadlines are October 13th. In-person deadlines are October 13th in New Jersey. And the election is November 3rd. So I just wanted to put that in people's, that people think about that. Sharon, do we have any questions or comments?
Yes, we do. One person asked, as a PTA, how can we support these parents and students? And the main thing is looking for resources, partnering with the school to see what kind of resources your school has. Every school should have, or hopefully will have a parent advisory committee for needs students. I know in my local school district, we do. You can also partner with organizations in the local areas such as SPAN and bring resources in and have parent programs for the parents. I know that the school does it, but as a PTA, you can do it also. And a lot of times when you do it as a PTA, parents are more apt, one, to attend, and two, they're apt to ask more questions because
Absolutely.
Together and they talk about, shared experiences. And out of those shared experiences, you usually get more questions. So those are some of the things that you can do as a PTA to support the parents. I know a lot of times when we as a PTA do programs, we kind of sometimes forget about that population. So, think about doing programs just for them, something that they can enjoy, or include them in programs that they'll be able to participate in.
And I would also add that as a PTA, I think that you are in a position to network with community stakeholders. I know, for example, every county in New Jersey has a county council for young children that works with children from age birth to 5. You have boys and girls clubs. I would network and use those are resources that are there in your communities. I would also network with them, and of course, not to mention SPAN. SPAN is always there to help network and work with groups. We work with, I also happen to be on the START project, the literacy project coordinator. We're always looking to start literacy groups in schools. So we don't only work with parents of students with special needs. if you're interested in forming a literacy group, as part of your, or literacy committee as part of your PTA, or NJTSS committee, or, so I would reach out and, like I said, use the resources that are there for you.
The next question was, I would like to know more about how 504s will be modified for virtual learning. Is it done statewide or by district?
So when you say modified, so when you have a 504 plan, when you think about a 504 plan, you think about access. So a 504 plan, each 504 plan is going to be determined by the needs of the child. So the way it's going to be modified, it may not be modified. I mean, it depends on what the child's needs are. If the child needs modifications based on the move from in-person to remote learning, then that's something that you would discuss with your 504 coordinator. But the fact that if your child has a 504 and he has certain modifications or accommodations, those wouldn't change just because they're still in effect even in remote learning, depending on what they are. Because obviously, for example, if your child has a 504 that says that they have preferential seating in the classroom, well, that wouldn't apply to at-home instruction. But then you may need other accommodations based on your at-home status. So that would be something, like I said, that you would discuss with your 504 coordinator.
I was interested to see what type of feedback you received from the extended summer year, this past summer. This for the
Extended school year?
Yes, for the extended school year.
So that was another thing that was very different in a lot of districts. I'm actually interested in hearing about people's experiences. So I know that a lot of schools did that remotely, and a few tried to do in person. So I'd actually be interested in hearing what was your experience with ESY, and if you find it beneficial. And Sharon, if you feel moved, you can actually unmute somebody if somebody wants to raise their hand and talk about that, because I'd be interested in hearing.
Yeah, it's getting ready to go because it doesn't. I'm trying to figure out how to unmute chat, but no one unmute. Normally
Let's see. Oh, I think you muted yourself, Sharon.
Oh, I did. Do you by chance have that button as a host?
No, I can only, I don't even see all the Oh, wait, let's see. Is there anybody who wants to raise their hand? I don't think I can unmute people though. I don't.
Oh, well, I can, you know what, I'll get Robin, he can let me know.
Yeah, I would have to.
One of the questions was, I'm concerned about how a child can be accurately evaluated virtually.
So that's very interesting. Today, actually, today I was actually on a webinar, or I was listening to some school districts talking about multi-tiered systems of supports. So, we at SPAN have been talking about, and the school district is talking about using multi-tiered systems of supports as a framework for reopening and reentry. Some school districts, multi-tiered systems of supports, we call it NJTSS, New Jersey Tiered Systems of Support. Some schools refer to it as RTI, Response to Intervention, which is a slightly different but similar framework. Has assessments built in. So, like I said, MTSS is a framework that is based around early detection and intervention. So, it as part of the frameworks, students are assessed, or that's what when I mentioned a universal screener, students are screened a couple of times a year. I think in the beginning of the year, in the spring, and then at the end, to assess their skills. They're really quick assessments, and it kind of gives teachers and schools the data they need to base decision making on. So that's why I said, when you go back to school, that's one of the questions you want to ask. Is your school using a universal screener or any kind of screening process? How will they be doing that? So a lot of the schools that are using NJTSS are using screeners, and they are being able to do the screening virtually. Yeah, so that was one of the issues that came up that schools are, that school teams are addressing, at least the ones that are using NJTSS. So I know it can be done. Whether or not your school is doing it is a question that you need to ask, because it's so important for schools to be able to assess not only academic, but also social emotional status of students as they return to school this year. Students, like I mentioned earlier, are coming from all over the place. Many of them have experienced trauma. Many of them have experienced a certain amount of isolation that they weren't used to. So it is social emotional learning is going to be very key this year.
And now I have the unmute button. However, I can only do it one at a time. You would like to ask a question or make a comment, just raise your hand and I'll unmute you.
Yes, I don't know. Did you have a question? Because I actually am interested. If somebody did ESY this year and they did it remotely, I am interested in knowing what your experience was. I've heard, a lot of different stories.
So far, I'm not seeing anybody with hand raised.
No.
So if you...
Another question I would ask, and I would like to get feedback, parent feedback, is how many people were part of their school's reopening committee? And what was your experience? That was something else that we were encouraging people to do, is be part of these reopening committees so that parent voice is there when planning is being done. Is there anybody here who was on a planning committee, a reopening committee?
Heather?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so yes, I'm the PTA president of Manchester Township, and I was part of the reopening committee from the superintendent's level with all the administrators, and then attended some of our school level restart planning committees, and a lot of my PTA members did that as well. But I was primarily focused on the district level with everyone there, and right off the bat, I started going through social media and obtaining and recording the overall questions that people were having and their gripes and their complaints about the spring semester with online, and just kind of getting the point of view from a lot of parents online. So when I went into these meetings, I had a lot of questions and concerns for the community. And so in the beginning, they were very much like, what are we doing? What's going on? Right? Those are like, oh my gosh, like the world is falling apart and what are we going to do about it? And then as we started drilling down and the district came out with their initial reopening plan, then the questions started getting more detailed down, like, well, if that's what we're doing, how are we doing this? What about here? What about there? So then it was more direct questions, and they filtered down even further for about three or four. It's like every week something else is changing, and the benefit I found is if I hadn't started really, and I wasn't engaging the community, I was just observing a lot of what was said. I wasn't enticing it. I wasn't trying to, provoke it at all. I was really just watching and listening. If I hadn't done that, I don't think the parents would have any more information than the original plan. I really fought and encouraged parents to support. If you want something, I will bring it up at every meeting and I'll state the purposes why we feel this is important to look at, but you also need to email the superintendent. They set up a special email for everyone.
Right.
And one thing I kind of noticed, and a lot of people do, is you expect them to go to one place for their information, and not everyone goes to the school website. So where all of this information was there, maybe broadcasted out once through the school, as the PTA, I was always regurgitating this information to the public, constantly sending it back out. If someone was saying they had, a question that I knew was like a hot topic and many people had it, and needed to be addressed, I would just put the parent, the email, the special email in there and say, tell him, tell them. And it was almost like a little joke that, the superintendent would be like, well, I got through 50 more emails today and I had 85 emails. So
it was very similar in my district. And but yeah, I mean, congratulations and hats off to you for doing that. I think it's so important. There are all those parents in districts that, and I'm constantly on, Facebook or, saying that Facebook is not a board member. You really need,
exactly.
You really need to, get off of Facebook and write those emails to people that can do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's super important and good for you for taking on that role.
See, I've tried to stay very neutral. I mean, I have my personal opinions on everything as well, but I've always looked at it as like, you have to go with the lowest denominator. Like who's the most worried in the group, and let's address that. And then everybody else should feel happy with the answers, right? So we've addressed the most worrisome people, and I've always said though too to everybody, like, doesn't mean you're going to get your way, but be heard. Make sure they hear you. So. And there are certain policies that a lot of people are not very happy. I mean, but
Sure.
It is what it is.
And you know what? It's never going to be a fact that everybody's happy, because I have to say, and this is something that interested me, especially for parents of students with special needs. So many of the school districts that were doing back to school reopening plan, create for the children with the most needs, they allowed, more in-person school time. And I personally was very surprised that a lot of parents of children with special needs didn't want that. They were, they wanted, for different reasons, they wanted to keep their kids at home. But but what I was noticing was that for every parent that was adamant that their child stay home and going back to school was reckless, there was another parent that was just equally as adamant that children need to be in school, for their social and emotional well-being, for their academic well-being. So, there was a large gamut, and there's a lot of variability in what parents want and why. And so we all need to keep in mind, though, I think that when we are dealing with parents, ourselves included, that everybody just wants what's best for their children. And we're all coming from very different places. But thank you for sharing that. Is there anybody else? We have a few minutes left. Is there anybody else who has a question or, wants to share something about back to school or reopening?
Yes, Andres had a question or a comment.
Okay.
And you should be able to talk to Andres.
So I think, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I think for us, really what it boiled down to, I'm from Clark, New Jersey, and I was in the reopening committee, still am. Some of the biggest things that we're facing right now in all those phone calls is to kind of guide the people in the township into asking these questions, but also trying to guide everyone to understand that the U.S. Board of Ed, the New Jersey Board of Ed, the county Board of Ed, we're all trying to come up with guidelines that match some of the other counties, and trying to appease parents and let them know that we can't jump into decisions We can't jump into plans. We can't jump into actions just by ourselves as an individual solo community, because it's going to affect a lot of the planning as we work with other townships, with other schools, with other facilities. So just getting everyone into understanding that we are not alone, but we are also alone at the same time, because we have to wait for the government to give us green lights to do event A, activity C, permission to do B. You know, we have to wait. We can't just jump into action. And that has a lot of parents frustrated,
Sure.
lack of information at the right time. So that has put a big worry into a lot of the parents. But we have plans now for reopening, and we share them with the community. And I think it has, like everybody said, it's appeased some parents. It has made some parents really angry. It has left a lot of vagueness in a lot of parents. A lot of them will be remote. Some of them are pulling the kids from the school altogether and will do homeschool. Some are going to go back to school because they're working families. They cannot afford to lose their job to stay home with their kid to do virtual classes.
Right.
So is that fluid conversation, is that fluid exchange. I'm also in the PTA for Clark, and we're trying to set up all of this planning for the year to do events for the community, events for the school, fundraising and outreach, and keep the students engaged, keep the teachers engaged, keep giving back to the community. But there's challenges with doing that when it comes to COVID. There's so much that is still unknown. A lot of our events are going to be put on pause at least until January to see if anything is fixed. So if the regulations kind of soften up a little bit and allow larger gatherings for larger fundraisings, for larger events, community events, school events. So a lot of the giving back to the teachers, giving back to the principals, giving back to our retired policemen, our retired military members. We can't do those giving back activities because there's so many unknowns. So there's a lot of that has the PTA really worried how to move forward, but we're going to move forward. We're going to continue to take it one step at a time, continue to motivate, the community and the school, and do what we can do, and just continue to be the best positive team that we can be through the PTA for the school community.
Great.
And we have one more. I know we're getting close to the end of the time, but I know there was one other person who put up her hand, so I wanted to make sure we give her an opportunity to speak. Alexandra? Are you still here? No? Okay, maybe she didn't mean to.
Sometimes that happens. So one thing I did want to say, I heard the gentleman who just spoke say that some people were homeschooling. SPAN just recently, in thinking about children with special needs, SPAN recently did a Facebook Live, and we talked about one of our newer quick guides or quick reference guides, tip sheets around, and it's very important, especially for parents of students with special needs, to understand and be clear on the differences between homeschooling, home instruction, and remote learning, because especially for children with special needs, they can all have different ramifications. And so I would encourage you to access the SPAN website, www.spanadvocacy.org, or the YouTube channel, the SPAN YouTube channel, to look for that Facebook Live presentation and access the tip sheet, which it discusses the differences between homeschooling, home instruction, and remote learning, because they all have different meanings and ramifications. And I'll end with that. And I want to thank you. And Chinwe, did you want to?
Yes, I'm really excited and grateful for this opportunity to spend time with our parents and our teachers. And like Debbie said, and everybody else, please be aware that there's so many resources out there. You don't have to feel alone or go through this difficult time by yourself. There are tons and tons of resources out there and advocacy groups. And I know Debbie's contact information is there, and my contact information is also on the screen. Each of us is just a telephone call away and an email away, and we're here for you. So we're in this together. So just be aware that you have all the support that you need, and we're really, really happy to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we want to thank you both for coming on. I tell you, for those of us that have special needs, we, you know, sometimes, you know, it is a lonely road, and to be able to have resources outside of the school system is, you know, it's nice to have, because I think, as you know, you can get as much knowledge as you can. When you can get as much knowledge as you can, you know, it helps your child even go further. So we appreciate all that you do, and we're looking forward to hearing more information. For those of you, please make sure that you check out the resource page, and we will make sure that we provide that for you. And without further ado, we want to thank everybody for attending, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.